and welcome back to Classical Fundamentals with Uplift Equine. Today we are going to go over the last, but not least, piece of groundwork that we will do in fundamentals. Now, this is certainly not the last piece of groundwork that we will ever do. The next level is movement, and then we've got refinement, and then haute école after that. So, but for this level, this is the last piece of groundwork before we finally get into riding. This is one of the most important ones, and I'm not trying to diminish the importance of the others, but this is extremely important for the development of collection, which is something you need any kind of degree of collection to be able to have the horse carry you properly. If you have zero collection, then you are essentially sitting directly on their spine, which is not good. It's not good, it's not okay. But this is an essential part of developing the beginnings of collection. And this is essential to learn before you start riding. Any of my students will know that I harp on shoulder in on the circle all the time. We're going to warm up, shoulder in the circle. What's the next thing? Shoulder in the circle. But let's get moving on this one. So, what is shoulder in on the circle? It is a light, so it's one of the lightest lateral movements that you can do using a circle to help introduce it, because the horse is going to naturally start to move this way if you make a tight enough circle. Some people don't like how the horse will adapt to this because, if you're not asking them to do this, then it's kind of annoying. But if the horse is not collected enough to go in a small circle, they will actually start doing this. But we will not induce it by having a smaller circle. If you start making your circle smaller and smaller, it's only natural because we're humans and we start walking in smaller diameter if we're focusing on so many different things. But ideally, you want to keep a large-ish circle to do this. It helps relax the horse during warm-up period. So once this becomes kind of rote routine, this actually helps relax them. It starts moving them slightly sideways, which kind of starts. You kind of start harnessing a little bit of dopamine release, because for some reason when horses go sideways, it releases some dopamine. So you want to have positive associations with this, and when the horse moves their body correctly, using their back correctly, in a sideways direction correctly, the horse actually does enjoy it. Believe it or not, the horse does. They do get a dopamine release of some level, some degree. This engages the abdominal and neck muscles while simultaneously stretching the outside neck and lateral muscles. So in the previous video for forward down, we were stretching top line. Since we were doing it on the circle, we were kind of in slight bend, but it's mostly top line that we're stretching. With this, it is both partial top line and stretching the outer lats, so like the muscles that are stabilizing the ribs, and that outer shoulder and outer neck portion, whilst engaging the inner portion. So it's kind of like this stretch engagement thing. If you ever do Pilates, you will know this feeling. And even yoga, I think. Yoga's more some engagement, more stretching, where Pilates is stretching and a lot of engagement. So this is more like Pilates for them, which is good. It's healthy. But I will add to the relaxing for warm-up periods, because when you are at a show or in an area where they're unfamiliar, if you have this routine of getting them to relax with these movements, it is much easier for them to be able to handle the new environment better if they have something that they're already associating with the dopamine release. So it definitely does help them. But we'll talk more about routines in the creating a routine video later. It induces collection to the horse without compression. So doing shoulder in on the circle does not require the horse to compress itself. A lot of lateral movements, such as shoulder in on the straight line, it requires a little bit of compression, which is collection, because the horse has to stay balanced, go in a straight line, and do this lateral movement in sideways. So that's a natural requirement. Since you're on the circle, they can actually go into forward down while doing this. And this is actually a tool that I will use with some horses. So if the horse knows forward down on the ground, but not quite getting it in the saddle, due to a lot of factors, tight muscles, or they've learned other things whilst riding. So like a lot of horses, if they come into this training program and they've already been started by a different person, they tend to have a lot of riding under their belt, but this might be some of the first times that they will do groundwork. So they'll excel in the groundwork real fast, but then it doesn't quite move over to riding, which then you have to kind of use some more tools in your toolbox for this. And shoulder in on the circle is one of the main tools that I use for this. And it definitely helps the horse just stretch and relax, which shoulder in, as a contrast, helps the horse collect and engage. Circle, relax, and stretch. This can be turned in, and like I said, this can be turned into a regular shoulder in on the straight line when further strength and collection are built. Because if the horse is not strong enough to compress itself into at least a working trot or something in between a working and collected trot, the horse is not ready for shoulder in on a straight line. But you can use this to help strengthen them. So how do we perform this movement? The head must remain on the vertical and bend only as far as the point of the shoulder. If the horse is overbent, it becomes more of a passade, which is way more sideways than you want, and you stop being able to stretch the entire horse's side, like lateral side on the outside of the circle, and it disengages and drops the shoulder from the inside. That's why they go more extremely to the side. And like I said, this turns more into a passade, which is mainly used in bullfighting, and we learned this in the foundations. And we kind of use how the horse naturally drops his shoulder to our advantage to teach the horse how to basically go, sideways. But you don't want to continue that if you want to have a horse in collection, because you just don't want them to get misconstrued. As an adult, you could probably reintroduce it later if you want to have an agile bullfighting type horse. But as a young horse who may not quite get the nuance yet, you kind of don't want to keep doing it. But you do not want to overbend this, because the horse needs to use its entire body and its head as a fulcrum to be able to balance properly. And if the horse is overbent, they are no longer balancing properly and they are dropping their shoulder, which you don't want. You do not want this. In this picture, I am showing you the degree of bend. So this point of shoulder right here, I'm aligning the middle of his head to the point of his shoulder. So I'm stepping back quite a bit so that the camera can kind of take this moment. But that's the degree of bend that you want. It seems very slight. It's the same degree of bend that we went over in turn on the forehand. So if you want to kind of look more into it and hear more about that type of bend, check out the turn on the forehand video in this course. So first, you establish a circle. So you're in groundwork position, you are moving forward, you want to establish your circle before you start asking them to do extra stuff with it. So you want to bring the head into bend and move to the inside of the neck so that you can kind of access the side of the horse much easier, and you can kind of see better, see what the horse's feet are doing quite a bit better. You just have a different vantage point. You can eventually turn this into you're directly in front of the horse and you're using your groundwork whip to indicate that movement, that foot movement, but much of the time it's easier for the horse to kind of get the concept if you moved closer to his shoulder. But first, it is extremely important to put the horse's head into bend first, because if you try to do the pressure on their rib cage and get their feet to move prior to putting them into bend, it will be harder for them to get the concept because they'll they will likely just continue to move forward faster. I'm just gonna say it now. They will just move forward faster because that's the only indication that they're getting. Bend is extremely important. First off, if they, excuse me, if they have trouble bending, which another one of my students' horses had a lot of trouble with this. He had a lot of tension in his shoulder, which caused him not to be able to bend properly for kind of an extended period of time. He eventually got into bend, which is nice, but if the horse has trouble bending in its neck without pushing the shoulder back out towards you, this is where you want to stop and just work on bending the neck whilst on the circle, because like I said, you can't go to the next step until you have proper bend. It's just that it's honestly just a balance thing for them. So the next thing is start touching the horse with your whip, and I say touching because it should just be touch. Right where your leg would sit if you're riding. And this goes with horses that are being driven as well. If you never intend on riding your horse and you want to move this signal somewhere else, you can. But this tends to be a natural spot for the horse to understand to move their hind legs from. Closer to the gaskin is also another area, or even higher above the area of the leg where their back is. Basically just cut the horse in half, and the back half is kind of where you want to have your signals. So back half of the horse is the hind signals. But if you want to kind of like follow me through this program, right where you have your leg is where you want to go, because I use other points of the horse's body for other things. So just to get ready for the rest of this program, you can go with where I ask the horse. But start touching the horse with your whip right where your leg would sit if you're riding, and on the inside. So you have, and like in this picture, I have his head in bend, and then I am touching his inner rib cage with the whip. And you must do this as the inside hind lifts off the ground and is traveling, because this is the most influential part of the gait that you can influence, basically. It's the most vulnerable part of the gait. When the horse's leg is lifted, that's when you can influence them properly. So that's when you put your pressure on as the horse's leg lifts, and then as the horse's foot is like pushed down onto the ground, that's when you release pressure. Even if they didn't do it, you want to ask every single time. And then when they do it, you stop and reward. That's how they can make the connection. But you don't put constant pressure as the horse moves, because likely the horse will start thinking, okay, even if they slightly did a muscle movement kind of in the direction that you want to go, but you didn't see it or you didn't catch it with your eyes, then they'll start doing other things because they think that they already tried that first thing, so they'll start speeding up thinking that's what you want. So you want the pressure and release every single step. Now you will repeat this once you're in the saddle as well, which, it becomes extremely important to be able to feel where all four of your horse's feet are, both hind and in the forehand. But we'll go over that later. But this is essential. So practicing this timing is something that will help you when you start riding. Now the inside hind, my thing is not, let me shut this off for a second. So the inside hind needs to step forward and under the body and align to the outside fore. Just like in this picture, you see his hind leg is now aligned as he steps down, and you can see my whip is no longer touching him. It is aligned with the outside fore, and I know shoulder in, you move their shoulders in, but putting that horse in bend gets them to lean in a little bit more, and then telling their hind leg to move under and over is where you want it to go, because this is collection, so moving the horse's leg more under the body. You can see he's now aligned his hind leg to his center, like the center of his body. So this gets them to lightly collect. It stretches a lot of different types of muscles, and it works a lot of different types of muscles. Learning, let me bring my camera back up. But learning the turn on the forehand is essential, because this is basically like you can start with the turn on the forehand and then lead the horse forward into shoulder around a circle, because it's essentially the same signals, but now we're moving forward on a circle, which is wonderful because this is why we learn things in a certain order. The horse is already familiar with moving away and moving their hind end forward and under themselves with turn on the forehand, and now this is a natural progression of that. So do not neglect your turn on the forehand. So here's the video that we will go over. So here's what you're supposed to be seeing if you are the one doing this. You can see his inside hind is moving under his body towards, no, he made a misstep, but towards his outside fore. So you are now on 3 tracks in a shoulder in position, moving on a circle. Let me bring my camera off for this. And then we will switch directions. And I promise you, I did have his nose clean, but once he sniffed some dirt, it became way dirty again. But you can see how it's so routine. He kind of knows what I'm going to ask him. So I don't really even need to touch his, his ribs. You can see he eventually just kind of starts walking on the circle until I start really touching him again. But then he will move back into shoulder in. He has a little bit more difficulty on this side because this was his stiffer side that he developed with his tooth problem. But he will still do it, and that's why I will still reward him. But this is what it looks like from the ground if you're just observing this on the outside, and this is why I gave you that first person perspective, because it's really kind of hard to see unless you're right up in there. So you establish this a circle. Now you can see how he kind of collects himself a little bit mentally. Kind of shortens his stride because he knows what's next. You can see how he's starting to move on 3 tracks. And here I'm just checking bend with the bending, just to make sure that he can accept bend properly. And here I'm seeing he's a bit stiff going to the right. So if you have a little bit of stiffness, you can always check with your bending and stelling, just like I did. And then you can move back onto shoulder in on the circle. You can see how he's moving his hind leg under and forward towards his outside fore. And then we will be going the other direction. Now it is extremely important to practice this going both directions so that they get an even stretch in both directions. If they are severely, like, I don't want to say malformed, but if their muscling is way different on one side or the other, you may practice more of it on one side than the other, but you need to be careful of that because as they start muscling, you don't want to have under-muscled, like if you have an over-muscled left side and an under-muscled right side, and then you work the right side too much, then you don't want to be swapping that under-muscling and over-muscling. So you eventually do want to do this evenly on both sides. Generally, I do this a little bit longer on the right because of his flexibility issue. But I will do more things on the left that is strengthening things like forward down to kind of compensate for that. And then you can do this on the lunge as well. So you can actually turn this into shoulder in on the circle at the trot if you utilize the lunge line. So he's being a good boy and offering forward down at the walk. Now I'm going to ask him to kind of pick it up into a trot. And leading with energy is where you will learn how to do this. Of course, he's being a little naughty right there. But you can bring up my camera again. You can ask the same things into a trot while you're right next to them. And you kind of want to start closer to them at the trot before you go longer with your long lunge line or lunge whip so that they kind of understand what is going on with this shoulder in on the circle. But you can do on the lunge line, free head, shoulder in on the circle at the trot. Going, the direction that I just was. He did a couple of steps and then I stopped and rewarded him. But that is shoulder in on the circle, the last groundwork bit that we're going to do in fundamentals during our riding. So this is the halt work, the turn on the forehand, the leading with energy, forward down, the walk in the trot, and moving into the canter, and then the shoulder on the circle. Those are the things that you need to know if you're going to go from intro through first level dressage, or I think it's basic through first level Western dressage. I'm still learning the tests, and I'm sure once we get to practicing the tests, I will become way more familiar with them as we keep going along. But if you, take the time, give yourself a foundation, you will progress much faster in the saddle than way faster in the saddle than expected. You just have to give yourself some time in the beginning. It's like rolling a large boulder up a small hill and down a big hill. So it's hard. You have little momentum going up the hill, but then once you hit the peak, once you get your riding in properly, after you've got your foundations, that's when the ball starts rolling down the hill much faster, if you know what I mean. So let that be an encouragement to you to keep on keeping on, no matter what people will say, because depending on where you're boarding, if you have other people watching you, sometimes I have had the gamut of commentary and people literally physically trying to come in and intervene because, I don't know, they think that I'm ruining the horse by giving them groundwork to do. That's weird. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. Um, Thank you for supporting this channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button if you want to keep following this course. And give us a like and let me know what you think about the shouldering on the circle business. Let me know if it helps you. Just give it a try. Give it a couple of days at the very least. Give it a couple of days. And of course, you can always contact me if you want to have any kind of one-on-one coaching online or in person if you're in the Central Indiana area. But check us out on Patreon as well. And of course, if you want to see the full content of this course as we progress, then you'll need to subscribe in a membership of either YouTube or Patreon. They will both have the same videos posted for the same levels. YouTube is slightly more expensive because they take a larger cut. So those are the things. I am still working on some YouTube exclusives to kind of make that 30% cut a little bit more worth it. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching, and like I said, become a member of either Patreon or YouTube if you want to support my little movement going on here with the training. But just thank you for following us through this anyway, and following Revan through his training as he progresses as a dressage horse as well. And always have a wonderful day. Thank you for my Patreon members for supporting this video. And always be kind. Have a wonderful time. Thank you.